Hey, hi there once again. Remember that module called change? The one quote we had is the only thing constant is change. Well, you know what? We also realize that we have to embrace change. And we realize that people don't mind changing, they mind being changed. It is very important that we also consider the fact, how do we personally embrace change? Typically, individuals respond to change in one of four different ways. They find themselves drowning. Secondly, they find themselves in a survival mode, surviving. And as they evolve, they find themselves striving. And then the next thing, they move towards thriving. But one of the things we did not discuss in the workshop, I'd like to give you some additional tips. We talked about drowning and what are the ideas there. Typically, people are in apathy. They've given up. They resign. They're saying, what's the use? And chances are we have to ask ourselves, are we saying that when it comes to some changes? Well, I'd like to give you some tips. When it comes to being in that drowning mode, one of the things that I've found that really works effectively, and you're saying, Jarvis, say more about that, is that look for those little things and reasons why this might be a good idea. In other words, ask yourself, what is the worst thing that can happen? And typically, if we can get a little movement going, we can now become a part of the change and embrace it. Maybe not wholeheartedly. Don't condemn yourself if you're not able to, but celebrate those small successes. The next thing we talked about, as you recall, is surviving. And what are some of the attributes? Well, when it comes to surviving, typically we found ourselves, we're not going to contribute any new ideas. Guess what? We said, we'll just see how long this lasts. We just have this wait and see attitude. Well, what I'd like to do is to share with you a couple tips around that. When you have that wait and see attitude, look around and ask some other departments and other organizations, parts of the organization, how are they managing this change? Try to draw on some good ideas from them. And one of the key things to do is not to entertain anyone negative coming to you, talking to you about the change. When you're in a survival mode, it's very important that you protect yourself against that negativity. And you know what? It's amazing. It's much easier to steer a moving car. Remember we said that. If you can start moving forward and celebrating the minor successes, you can find yourself no longer simply being stuck in a surviving mode. Well, we want to get to striving. And striving becomes those opportunities when we start actually using our communication tips. Well, let me describe to you some of those behaviors. When it comes to striving, we find ourselves not so much entrenched in negative ideas. We're actually beginning to find and look for some ways to make this thing work. No longer are we resisting change. We may not totally be embracing it, but all of a sudden now it becomes so much easier to deal with. We're striving with some tips to help you evolve beyond just striving. Tell you what, start looking for those success and join in these positive conversations. Invite yourself to be a part of the teams that are part of designing the next stage of change. Find yourself being in a position to now be an advocate. Maybe not totally, but at least you find yourself now around people that are very positive and influencing this change. When it comes to thriving, guess what? Obviously, we don't want to evolve past that. We want to sustain that. And that's often hard. When it comes to being in a position, oh, we love being there and thriving, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of involvement. And you say, Jarvis, say more about that. What else is next? One of the things that we found that's very critical, what are the methods and processes that we can put in place in order to sustain this change? It's one thing to embrace it. It's another thing to be able to sustain it and become advocates for the organization. This is when we also not only simply communicate, we communicate in a way to meet their disc styles. Oh yes, I'm sure you remember that. We're tailoring our commitment and we're tailoring our communication in a way that makes a difference. When it comes to thriving, thrive, 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 and apply these skills and look for ways to reinforce what you already know. And yes, you know what? Ask yourself those what-if questions. What if we did something even more different in a way that could make a bigger change? Keep on. Remember this. Remember these tips, and you will be very effective in embracing change.